This series of video tutorials comes under the theme project development. And any project that you undertake is going to fall into three distinct phases. First of all, you have an idea, then you develop your idea, and then finally, after you've done the first two, you build your idea, you produce your craft item. And we're focusing on this middle stage. There's a good reason that we're focusing on it, and that is that not only that it's very important, but also people miss it out. And if you find that your craft work is a little bit hit and miss, sometimes you make something really good, sometimes it seems a little bit less than what you expected, doesn't quite match up to the idea that you first had. It's probably because you're either not doing or you're not doing enough of this development stage. Here is where we make our mistakes on paper. Here is where we try out ideas, see if they look right, see if we need to adapt things a little bit. We make sure that what we're building meets the key criteria of design, i.e. that it's fit for purpose, that the materials that we've chosen to build it with are suitable, that it's aesthetically pleasing, it looks good, and that it's buildable. We can actually make it with the skills and equipment that we've got. So when we think of it like that, it stands to reason that going straight from your idea to building almost guarantees that we're going to make mistakes here, which we don't want to do. We don't want to be wasting our time. We don't want to be getting frustrated in our workshops. We don't want to be wasting expensive materials. So why do new makers tend to underplay the value of project development? As we've already mentioned, one reason is probably that we're just enthusiastic. We want to get into the shed and start building. Another reason is that perhaps we find this area a little bit intimidating. The idea of project development might not suit our idea of what a craftsman does, and so we tend to shy away from it a little bit. So what we're going to do, we're going to break down project development into three easy steps and demystify it a little bit, make those steps as easy as possible so that we actually enjoy it. We do a good job at this stage to maximise our potential at this stage. So what are those key steps? Step one is model making. Either make a model or a drawing to help you to really visualise what you're going to make and snag things, make any changes that you need to make. Step two is finding and selecting the right materials for your job. And then step three is producing a joiner's rod, a cutting list, and a schedule to make sure that you can make what you want to make within a reasonable time frame. So today we're going to start with the first of those steps. We're going to make drawings and models to help us to visualise what we're about to make before we start to make it in wood. So now we're going to look at how we can use drawings and models to develop your project, and we'll see that this is a key part of project development, and you'll be relieved to know that you don't need advanced skills to do this well, and you certainly don't need a lot of expensive equipment. Our aims are to learn how drawing and model making support the development of your project, and to learn how to select and use the best technique or techniques for your project. Our objectives, what you should be able to do to explain the importance of drawing and model making for the designer maker, to identify a range of techniques, stating where they could be used and give some positives and negatives about each technique, and for you, the learner, to demonstrate effective use of at least one of the techniques demonstrated. So to explore model making and sketching, we're going to use this box as our example. It's really simple, obviously, and you might not think it's worth making a model of a box before you make it, because it's so basic. However, the principles that we're going to explore and discuss, you can use and transpose into more complex project work. So try and pick up on the principles rather than the actual medium that we're using for this. So imagine that you've been given a commission. Someone's asked you to build a writing box out of a suitable material. They want some carved work on it. This is something that I made for my mum. You could say it was a bit of a commission, really. I didn't get paid for it, but I wanted to get it right. I wanted to get the proportions right, so I'm going to talk you through some of the processes that I did, even though this was quite a simple project, to make sure everything worked out, the final product looked as I wanted it to look, same as I'd visualised once I had the first idea. So before making it out of oak, I made a model. And this is about as basic as you can get. What I've done, I printed on decent quality card the effect of the timber that I wanted to use, which is European oak, and then used that card to build a box. And the main things that I wanted to get right, the details that I wanted to get right were the proportions, the relationship between the length, the height and the depth of the box, and this detail on the top. So this isn't the actual model, I made this a long time ago, but it's something like. And what I started with was the golden ratio. 1 to 1.6 is usually a good ratio when we're making anything, whether it's a picture frame, a box, or pretty much anything that we want to look good. So that proportion from here to here is 1 to 1.6. So I've made the box in that proportion, should look good. But do you know, when I look at that carefully at the side, that looks too boxy, and I'm thinking that maybe I should have made that a little bit less tall. So keep that ratio, but reduce the ratio there a little bit. Also, the compass rose that I wanted to carve into the top, with the points going all the way through, it looks a little bit clinical, doesn't quite give the effect that I wanted. So what I can do, having learned from my model, I can reduce the height a little bit, and I can alter this compass rose a little bit. So that's basically the process that I went through. And the end result, as you can see, if you compare the two, slightly flatter, slightly different design to the carving that I did. And working it out on paper obviously saved me the time and trouble of making a box, which wasn't really what I wanted. So it's not just boxes. Designers still use card models to conceptualize and develop all sorts of furniture and wooden objects, from the very simple to the very complex. It's also a technique that our students have used in the past very successfully to get the best out of their ideas and make sure their end product matched their aspirations. So let's think about some fors and againsts for this technique. For, in its favour, you get quite a clear idea of what the end product will look like, which you can turn around, you can move it around in your hands, and get a good idea of how it's going to look from every angle. On the downside, it's quite difficult to adapt. So if I wanted to actually take some of the height off this cardboard model, there's quite a lot of time and effort to do that, and it's not really very adaptable. It also takes quite a long time to make. So there's probably an hour and a half in making this, whereas a sketch could probably be done in 5 or 10 minutes. So for that reason, or for those reasons, a lot of makers still prefer to put their ideas onto paper and try and get a 2-dimensional sketch, or a 3-dimensional picture of what they're going to build, but using quick 2D sketching methods. So that's what we're going to look at next. We're going to look at how to use 2-point perspective to very quickly get a 3D picture of what we're going to build. So now we're going to look at sketching, trying to get a 3-dimensional picture onto paper. Some of you might be quite confident with that already. A lot of people naturally manage to sketch 3D images on paper and conceptualize their ideas in that way. However, not all of us are gifted artists. We don't have to be a good woodworker. So what we're going to do, we're going to look at a technique called two-point perspective. We're going to use that to show how you can reliably, consistently get a pretty good idea of the image that you're trying to make onto paper, even if you're not particularly a gifted artist. So we're going to start with the same box as we used for our cardboard model, but demonstrate how we can get the same sort of visual aid on paper using two-point perspective. And the first thing that we're going to do is draw a plan view, that is looking down on the top of the box. I'm going to set this up somewhere near the top of my page. The box proportions that I've worked out in my head are around 250 millimeters by 180 millimeters by about 120 millimeters tall. And again, they roughly confirm to that ideal proportion, the golden ratio. That's just the top. So that's just construction. I've done that quite lightly. That's something that we're going to lose when we finish the drawing. Next thing we need to do is put in a horizon line. So just underneath that plan view of our box, I put another construction line all the way across the page. You've heard me talking about two-point perspective. This is where the 2 points come in. Somewhere near the edge of our page, I'm going to put in point 1 and point 2. Next, I take my T-square. I'm going to draw some vertical lines straight down. It's still just construction lines. None of these need to be too heavy. Just take them pretty much down to the bottom of the page. I'm using a 2H. I'm using an HB pencil. You can use a 2H pencil. I'm doing this so that the lines show up for the video. So the next thing I need is the height of my box, which we've said is about 120 millimeters. I'm going to put that on this center line, the line that represents the corner of the box that's nearest to me. I'm going to mark 120 millimeters of height. And from this point on, it gets really easy, not too much thinking involved. What I'm going to do is I'm going to join up these points on my vertical line with my points on this horizon line. These are called vanishing points. And if you imagine the box that we're drawing vanishes off into the distance at these points, at point 1 and point 2. So put those in. Put these points in. You're starting to see a box come out of the mist a little bit. So we need the top. So again, from point 1 to this intersection here. Point 2 to the far corner here. And this is our box in 2-point perspective. Now I'm going to strengthen those lines up a little bit so you can see them. Just going to use a felt tip pen so they're nice and strong, so the box starts to come out of the construction lines. And it doesn't matter if your lines overlap a little bit. Sometimes that can give the drawing a nice sketchy feel. So that's the outline of our box. And there's the top. So we've got something that looks like a three-dimensional box on paper with no artistic ability whatsoever, just following a few basic guidelines. And as you do it, as you practice this technique, it's really obvious. It might seem as though, well, why did he join that line to that point? While you're doing it, it's really obvious. It's quite intuitive, quite self-evident as you go around it. So, do I like it? Yeah, that's about the proportions that I was hoping for. So the next thing that I want to do is put a little bit of detail on the box. I'm happy with the proportions, but I want to see where the lid goes, and most importantly, I want to see how that round design, that compass rose with the initials in it, works out. That's the main reason for doing this on paper and trying to get a concept sketch together before I start making. So what's difficult about that becomes obvious if you have a look at the drawing. How do we put an accurate circle on the top of that perspective sketch? How do we know how it disappears? If you get a compass and draw a circle in there, it's just not going to look right. So this is where the construction gets a little bit more difficult. And this is a good exercise. It's one of the techniques that you might find useful if you doing anything with curve work on it. There's all sorts of things you can explore. This is just a bit of a starter. Let's have a look how we do that. So going back to our plan view, we're going to find the centre point of our plan. So just measuring round, that's 180, half of that is 90. 90. Halfway point along here, that's 250, so halfway 125. 125. So we've got the centre points of the perimeter of our lid. We're going to bring those lines back down to our perspective drawing. So just bring that down to there, make a little tick, bring that down, make a little tick. Same for the other two. So we've got centre points on our plan view, got centre points on our perspective view, and we're going to join those up. And we've got the centre of our lid here and the centre of our lid here. That's a starting point for our circle. So we're going to draw the circle on our plan view. And the diameter of that circle is 120 millimetres, so half of that for the radius is 60 millimetres. So I've drawn that circle here, as it would appear looking straight down on our box. To transfer that to our perspective view, we need to take down the intersections of where the circle intersects with those centre lines that we've already put on. And again, put a little tick to represent each of those. So taking that intersection and bringing it down to our perspective view. And what we can do now is make a square that we then sketch our circle inside of. So back to our 2 points, our vanishing points. I'm going to draw a line through those intersection points. And here we have a square. So if you follow that carefully, you can see in amongst all those construction lines, we've got a square. And we can sketch a circle inside of that square. So this is where really we run out of geometry, and we've just got to try and use our eye a little bit. So bring that round to there. Around there. It's quite a flat circle. It's an ellipse, really. Any circle in a perspective view turns into an ellipse. That's what we've got there, and it's not bad. It's not too far from what it would look like if we were looking at that angle at the top of the box. So just so we can see it a little bit better, put it in with a felt tip pen. And I'm going to rub out some of the construction so we can see that a bit better. Okay, so we've got an okay ellipse, and then again by eye, if I put in those initials, the JM, which is my mum, it's initials and mine as it happens, and I'm just going to put in the points of that compass that was part of the design of the box. And it's sketchy, and that's okay. It gives me an idea. We're trying to get a concept of things. Next thing I'm going to do is put in the lid position. So imagine we put in the lid about here, halfway. Gives me a chance to look at that, and it's subdividing the box. Looks a little bit too symmetrical. I don't really like it. So this again shows the strength of working things out first. I'm going to move that up a little bit, make the lid smaller than the base of the box. Again, strengthen those lines up. And there we are, we've got a pretty good idea of what we're making. So just a final touch, tidy things up a little bit. I'm just going to strengthen the outline. So if you just fatten up the outline of the box, it brings it off the page a little bit. Makes it stand out. And then the next thing I could do would be to rub out some of the construction lines. And that should give you a pretty good working idea of what you're going to build, and it's something that you can sketch on and adapt. And all that probably took about 10 minutes to do. So I'm just going to go through the same sort of process, but without any construction lines, just doing it by eye, and we're going to speed it up a little bit for the purposes of the video. I'm not quite that fast, but it gives you an idea of what you can accomplish really quick with just a pencil and a piece of paper. So this technique of using two-point perspective is really good for visualising simple frames and structures, but it can also be used for some very complex items as well. The key is to start with a box. Imagine if you're trying to draw something complicated, that first of all you're drawing the box that it came in, and then fill in the detail within that box. It takes a little bit of patience and it takes a bit of practice to master this technique, but it's a very satisfying and useful tool in its own right, and very, very useful for the furniture designer maker. Right, so we've been through the basics of two-point perspective. Let's have a think about some fors and againsts. So in its favour, it's very quick, it's very adaptable. It's something that you can use if you want to change your design as you're going along, or if there's a group of you and you want to swap ideas around. Really, really useful for that. The downside, the negatives are, I suppose, it does take a little while to master. Doesn't take a lot of expensive equipment, but a little bit of patience while you get the hang of it. And it's difficult to show textures and really show the material. Unless you're a very good artist with a full set of paintbrushes and colours, it's difficult to show the textures and type of material that you're using. So what would be really useful was if you had something that combined the best aspects of modelling in card and drawing in two-point perspective. And there is something that does that for us. It's computer-aided design, CAD. Unfortunately, it has historically been really, really expensive. But fortunately, there's now a package on the market that's not only free to download and use, it's also pretty user-friendly. You don't have to be an expert. That's Google Sketchup, which is used by architects and designers right across the world. And the free version is used by me and lots of small-scale and amateur designer makers to quickly get a good rendition in 3 dimensions on a computer screen of something that they intend to make. So that's what we're going to have a look at in our last video. Okay, Google Sketchup is a powerful 3D modelling program used by architects and designers. There's a free version that you can download, and it's backed up by an extensive support network. So it's really useful if you're just getting used to using your computer for drawing and modelling. So we'll start by Googling Sketchup. And the first thing that comes up will be the Sketchup homepage. The next thing that you need to do is download Sketchup. When they ask what you plan to use Google Sketchup for, select Personal Projects, enter your email address, and this dialog box will ask you what your profession or interest is. I've clicked Product Design. Select your operating system, agree to the license agreement, and then you should be able to start your download. And then just follow the steps as the download program asks you for further information. So now you've downloaded SketchUp, I'm going to show you how to access the tutorial videos. We're not producing our own college videos because SketchUp has such a broad library of tutorials already made. Really, we couldn't improve on that. So what you need to do on your home page, up on the top bar, click on Learn and Video Tutorials. On the Video Tutorials page, you've got some options. You can start with Getting Started. Perhaps you've already used SketchUp before. Familiar with SketchUp will take you to some more advanced techniques. If you're an expert, you can fine-tune your skills so that you can make it do pretty much anything that you want.